Now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, but others Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Then he sternly ordered the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. From that time on, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and undergo great suffering at the hands of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, "God forbid it, Lord, this must never happen to you." But he turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan, you are a stumbling block to me, for you are setting your mind not on divine things but on human things."
Have you ever had one of those moments where you absolutely nailed the right answer, felt like a genius, and then immediately said something so stupid that you wanted to crawl under a rock? That's basically Peter's entire experience in today's gospel, and honestly, it's probably the most relatable thing in the entire Bible. Picture this: Jesus and the disciples are hanging out in Caesarea Philippi, basically the Las Vegas of the ancient world, a place known for pagan temples and wild parties. Jesus decides this is the perfect moment for a pop quiz. "So, who do people think I am?" The disciples start rattling off answers like they're on a game show. John the Baptist, Elijah, Jeremiah, one of the prophets. Then Jesus gets personal. "But who do you say that I am?" And Peter, bless his impulsive heart, blurts out the answer that would change everything. "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Boom, mic drop, perfect answer. Jesus is so thrilled that he basically gives Peter the spiritual equivalent of a gold star and the keys to the kingdom. "Blessed are you, Simon, this wasn't your brilliant deduction, God revealed this to you." Then comes the famous declaration about building his church on this rock, and Peter's getting the keys to heaven. Peter must have been feeling pretty good about himself right about then. But here's where it gets beautifully, tragically human. Jesus starts explaining that he needs to go to Jerusalem, suffer, and die. And Peter, the same guy who just received divine revelation, immediately switches into protective friend mode and starts arguing with Jesus. "No way, Lord, this will never happen to you." Jesus' response is swift and brutal. "Get behind me, Satan." Ouch, talk about whiplash. One minute you're the rock, the next minute you're being called Satan. Peter went from hero to zero in record time. But here's what I love about this story: it's so incredibly human. How many times have we experienced something similar? You have a moment of clarity, maybe during prayer or a deep conversation, where you really get it. You understand what God is calling you to do. You feel his presence. You're on fire with faith. Then life happens, and suddenly you're back to your old patterns, making decisions based on fear instead of faith. I remember when my friend Mark felt called to leave his high-paying corporate job to work with homeless youth. He had this incredible sense of peace about it, knew it was God's will. But when he started telling people, and they began questioning his sanity and financial security, he started second-guessing everything. One day he was Peter receiving revelation. The next day he was Peter trying to talk Jesus out of the cross. The thing is, Peter's mistake wasn't caring about Jesus, it was thinking he knew better than God about what was best. He wanted to protect Jesus from suffering, which sounds noble, right? But he was operating from human logic instead of divine wisdom. He couldn't see that the cross wasn't the end of the story, it was the whole point of the story. We do this all the time. We pray for healing, but when the treatment gets tough, we want to quit. We ask God to help us forgive someone, but when the opportunity comes to actually do it, we resist. We want God's will for our lives, but only if it looks like what we think it should look like. Jesus called Peter Satan not because Peter was evil, but because he was being a stumbling block, literally trying to trip Jesus up and divert him from his mission. Sometimes our well-meaning advice, our protective instincts, our human wisdom can actually work against God's plans. But here's the beautiful thing about this story. Jesus didn't fire Peter. He didn't take back the keys or find a new rock to build his church on. He corrected him, yes, but he didn't abandon him, because Jesus knows we're going to have these moments where we flip-flop between divine insight and human foolishness. The key is learning to recognize when we're operating from human things versus divine things. Human things focus on comfort, safety, avoiding pain, maintaining control. Divine things often involve sacrifice, trust, embracing difficulty for a greater purpose, and surrendering control. So the next time you find yourself trying to talk God out of something He's clearly calling you toward, remember Peter. Remember that even the guy who got the keys to the kingdom had moments where he completely missed the point. The goal isn't perfection, it's staying teachable, staying humble, and being willing to get back on track when Jesus says, "You're thinking like a human, not like God." After all, the same Peter who was called Satan in this passage would later become the cornerstone of the early church. Sometimes our biggest failures are just preparation for our greatest victories.